My father brought home my childhood sweetheart to be my future husband and cultivated him carefully. Later, he inherited my father's company but didn't marry me because he had his first love. Once, due to a drunken mistake on my part, I made him miss the flight to go abroad with his first love. But the plane crashed and his first love died a horrible death. Because of this, he hated me. If it weren't for you, how could she be gone? How could she die? I was trapped for 7 years and lived like a broken doll, wishing I were dead. But he was still not satisfied. There's still a long way to go. You have to hold on and not die. Sister. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the time when my father had just brought my childhood sweetheart home. This time, I turned my head away. Let him go. I don't need any brother. But he panicked. What kind of kindness is it to adopt me? Haven't I been slaving away for your family all these years? Neither of you, father and daughter, is any good. He should die. And you should die too. If it weren't for you, how could she die? Ian's hoarse and resentful words, like the whisper of a devil, suddenly exploded in my ears. I sat up on the bed sweating profusely, covering my throbbing heart, my body trembling uncontrollably. Why did I dream of the things in my past life again? I pinched the bridge of my nose hard, threw off the quilt and got out of bed, put on a coat and left the bedroom. The villa was silent. The study on the 3rd floor had its door tightly closed, and a ray of light shone through the crack. My father was still working. I stared blankly at that ray of light and involuntarily wanted to get closer to it. Finally, I sat down leaning against the study door, hugging myself. The events of my past life, like a nightmare, had been haunting me in the 6 months since my rebirth, not only preventing me from sleeping well but also constantly warning myself. Ian was a vicious wolf. A cold-blooded and ruthless person like him could never be tamed into a loyal dog. In my past life, my father took pity on his misfortune. After his parents died in an accident and his family went bankrupt, my father brought him back to the zoo family. At that time, my father stroked my head and gently persuaded me to accept the suddenly appearing brother and Neiman. Father can't be with you all your life. Ian is the fallback father has arranged for you. He's an ambitious boy. With him to protect our Enanon in the future, we can be at ease. My father's palm was still warm. At that time, I didn't understand why his expression was so sad. It was not until 6 years later that my father died of a serious illness due to overwork. Only then did I finally understand why his eyes looked at me so sadly and reluctantly at that time. It turned out that my father had seen the end of his life a long time ago. He had made all the preparations for me in advance. In his heart, with Ian to protect me, I could be a carefree little princess all my life. Unfortunately, things in the world are always contrary to what one wishes. My father hoped that I could live a worry-free life. But his young wife was ambitious and had long regarded me as a tool to obtain benefits. As soon as he died, she wanted to send me to the bed of that old man in the Lin family. At that time, no one expected that the glass of drugged wine meant for me would be drunk by Ian. We were confused and drunk all night. And Ian also missed the plane of his first love. Song Kiao. Things in the world are so make fun of SB. The plane that Song Kiao was on crashed, and Ian lost his beloved forever. He blamed all of this on me, believing that I had conspired with my stepmother to calculate him, and hated me to the bone. He was like a devil in human skin. On the surface, he was insincere with me and played the role of a couple along with the flow, deceiving the directors of the zoo group to trust him. In fact, he had already aimed his gun at me. After gradually annexing my family's property, building up his own influence and making a comeback, he finally showed his true face. I was imprisoned in the basement by him and bullied day and night. He used the torture of me to atone for Song Kiao. In those 6 years, I lived a life worse than death, like a rag doll. If it hadn't been for that unexpected fire, perhaps I would have continued to linger on in a half-dead state, until his hatred in his heart disappeared. That fire ended my nightmare and also brought me a new life. I was reborn back to the age of 15. On the eve of my father's decision to adopt Ian, when my father showed pity and sympathy for Ian's family's misfortune, I calmly stopped him. Father, I don't want to be a flower in the greenhouse anymore. Starting from today, I will learn to do business, manage the company, fulfill my responsibilities as an heir, and shoulder the future of the Zhu family. I don't need you to painstakingly arrange any fallback for me. I will become strong on my own and support the Zhu family. Even though the road ahead is bumpy, I am willing to step on that road full of intrigue, but belonging only to myself. Because I have already experienced despair once. So in this life, I will never be that weak person whose wings are broken and has no power to resist. As for my father's expectations in these two lives, I am doomed to disappoint them. I persuaded my father to give up adopting Ian. In this life, I don't want to have any connection with this devil anymore. In this life, without the help of our Zhu family, what will happen to Ian's future, and whether he and his beloved Songki, I will be separated by life and death again, have nothing to do with me. Now, I just want to seize every opportunity to make myself stronger. Only when I am strong can I truly protect the Zhu family and keep my father's hard-earned achievements. On this thorny road, the first unfavorable factor I want to get rid of is my young stepmother Mia, who harbors ambition and calculation. And on. Why are you not sleeping in the middle of the night and squatting at your father's door? Above my head, my father's gentle and concerned voice suddenly appeared, breaking my memories. I blinked hard and held back the weakness in my eyes, and said obediently, I'm a little insomnia. Father, can we talk? Next time if you want to find father, just come in directly. Don't squat at the door anymore. Father rubbed my head and helplessly pulled me into the study. Tell me, what do you want to talk about? Dad, when I was shopping outside the other day, I seemed to see Aunt Mia enter a hotel with an uncle. I paused for a moment and didn't continue, leaving enough space for Dad to think. As I expected, Dad frowned and his tone became serious. On. Do you know what you were talking about? I twitched the corners of my mouth, looking aggrieved and innocent. Dad, I have no reason to lie to you. Mia did have an affair indeed, and her lover was Dad's current driver. However, I didn't see this matter myself. It was Ian in my previous life. In order to revenge on me and humiliate the Zhu family, he deliberately exposed it to disgust me. Judging from the timeline exposed by Ian, this pair of scumbags has already colluded with each other by now. In my previous life, if Dad hadn't been seriously ill, perhaps Mia would have tried every means to create an accident so that they could be together. This time, I just exposed their actions in advance. Dad was silent for a long time, then reached out and rubbed my head again, and his tone became gentle. Arya, Dad has known about this matter and will deal with it as he sees fit. Don't think about it any more in the future. This meant that I was not allowed to interfere anymore. I wasn't surprised at all that Dad would react like this. The seed of doubt has been sown. With Dad's ability, it is only a matter of time before he can get the actual evidence. I obediently agreed. After earnestly persuading him to take care of his health, I went back to my room honestly. I had a good night's sleep. The next day, I continued to play the role of a high school student and went to school honestly. The school I am studying at now is a well-known private high school in Beijing. All those who can study here are the second-generation rich or noble. Coincidentally, Ian also studies in this school and is my classmate. Since Ian's family went bankrupt, a once prominent figure like a favored son of heaven, has also fallen into the dust and become someone that everyone can look down on. In my previous life, with the protection of my Zhu family, he was spared these contemptuous or pitying looks. In this life, he can only bear it by himself. As I was lost in my thoughts, when I walked into the classroom, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the mess on Ian's seat. But I didn't even blink. Living a new life, facing the ignorant young Ian, with my soul already an adult. I should have let the past grudges disappear. But I really can't help hating. Those bullying and tortures I suffered day and night in the past have already turned my heart into a stone. Now, just ignoring him instead of taking the opportunity to hit him when he is down and making him feel the same way is already the greatest kindness I can show to the ignorant him. 3 Bang. The classroom door was slammed open heavily. Ayon, with his clothes in disarray, rushed into the classroom out of breath and rushed in front of me. Sue. Arya. As he called out. His long and slender hands tightly grasped my wrist. And his expression was extremely obscure and complicated. In the classroom, the originally noisy voices of conversation all quieted down. I could feel the curious, suspicious or malicious gossipy eyes coming from all directions. You're not dead? This isn't a dream? Why did I come back? His voice was hoarse and indistinct, with a bit of hoarseness from lack of rest. We were very close, so I heard his almost murmured words and saw the disbelief and suspicion in his eyes that had not yet dissipated. Just with one glance, I clearly determined that he was also reborn. This was really great. The wrong has its origin, and the debt has its owner. My debtor has finally appeared. Then the grudges between us must be settled. Ian seemed to finally notice my strangeness. He subconsciously let go of his hand and took a step back, looking at me gravely. I quickly interrupted him and taunted mercilessly. Ian, did you go out without your brain today? As soon as these words came out, the quiet classroom immediately rang out with everyone's unceremonious laughter. Miss Sue is too venom-tongued. Going out without a brain means being an idiot. Is he finally unable to bear it and wants to make friends with Miss Sue? The Sue family and Dean's family are barely old friends. Arya will be soft-hearted, right? The whispering voices around were clearly heard in my ears. Seeing Ian's instantly extremely embarrassed look, I knew that he had also heard them. Looking at him tightly pursing his lips, with a look of being unable to bear the humiliation on his face. But there was a glimmer of expectation in his eyes that he himself didn't even notice. I was only left with cold sarcasm in my heart. In this new life, he still dares to try to use my sympathy to change his own fate. Isn't it enough that our Sue family was used as a stepping stone by you once? Do you still intend to do it again? Then those indignant words you shouted when you righteously accused me in the past would become a resounding slap in the face? Or do you think that in this world, you are the only one who knows the truth and can do whatever you want without fear? If so, calling you a wolf in human skin is an underestimation. With this flexible temperament, you should at least be called a contemporary Geoeugian. Thinking of this, my eyes suddenly became cold and stern. I propped my chin and lazily examined the man in front of me, suppressing my full of anger and nausea. Slowly raised the corners of my mouth, showing a smile that didn't reach my eyes but looked very pleasant. Classmate Ian, although I sympathize with you very much, if you want to find your brain, please go somewhere else. Don't be in front of me and dirty my eyes. As soon as these words came out, the laughter in the classroom became even louder. Some radical ones even deliberately came closer to humiliate him. There is an idiom. What is it? It seems to be, a toad wants to eat one meat? TSK. 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 Now any Tom, Dick or Harry can be in our school. It seems that we need to find time to have a good talk with the principal. Garbage should be thrown into the trash can consciously. Don't run out and disgust people. The merciless targeting and humiliation made Dean's face turn pale instantly. He clenched his fists tightly as if he was about to grab his school bag and smash it hard on the nose of a certain classmate who came up to humiliate him the next second. I coldly admired his humiliated appearance and only felt a sense of pleasure in my heart. Tut tut tut. This is just the beginning of revenge. Can't you bear just a few unpleasant words? The cruel torments you inflicted on me in my previous life. If I were to retaliate one by one, would you still be alive? Before I could admire for too long, Ian was so angry that he stormed out directly, looking at the classroom door that was slammed back heavily. The smile on my face slowly faded. Ian, it's just right for you to come back. It has made my pent-up hatred find an outlet. This time, we are only enemies and opponents. And I will have a great time with you. For although I had already seen through Ian's shamelessness, I didn't expect that he would actually have the nerve to come to the Zoo family. Darling, do you want to have one more brother to protect you? Dad waved to me with a smile. Just like in the previous life, Ian actually came here on his own initiative. I stood on the stairs with my arms folded, looking at Ian sitting opposite, with a slightly restrained manner, my eyes extremely cold. After being reborn, I had painstakingly dispelled Dad's idea of adopting Ian. But I didn't expect that he could be so shameless as to come here by himself. And easily, he had turned my efforts into nothing. Seeing Dad being so kind looking towards him, and clearly having placed his trust in him, a sense of powerlessness suddenly arose in my heart. Why? Is fate really so difficult to change? Then what is the point of my rebirth? Darling? Arya? Dad's voice full of confusion and worry was already close. I suddenly came to my senses and grabbed his hand that was reaching towards my forehead. My voice trembling and aggrieved. Dad. I don't want any brother. I only want you. Dad still thought I was being petty with him, and looked helpless. Silly child. Can I stay with you all my life? I was shocked in my heart, and looked at him sadly. For an instant, I had the impulse to tell him that the person you trust has not stayed with me all my life as you expected either. All the hardships I have suffered in my life were personally inflicted on me by this person you value. But after looking at him for a long time, in the end, I just repeated coldly and simply with tears in my eyes, I don't need a brother. And this family doesn't need one more person either. You. Dad was at a loss for words and looked at me for 2 seconds, probably finally sure that I was not being petulant. His expression finally became serious. He frowned and looked at me for a while, then turned to Ian and said, Sorry. Ian. As you can see Arya's attitude regarding the matter of adopting you, I may need to think about it again. Hearing this, Ian's face changed slightly. Why? Uncle Zoo. I can swear that I will take good care of Arya in the future. What kind of nobody are you? My father is still alive. Is it your turn to take care of me? I coldly interrupted him, unceremoniously showing my hostility towards him. Ian's expression changed several times, and his gaze finally fixed on my face. There was familiar confusion and suspicion in those eyes. Seeing this, I just wanted to sneer. What? Do you really think you are the chosen one and the world should revolve around you? Are you the only one who can be reborn? I closed my eyes forcefully, forcing myself to calm down, and said, Dad. I want to talk to him alone. Dad hesitated for a moment, patted me on the shoulder, and got up and left the living room. As soon as he left, the already tense atmosphere in the living room immediately became full of undercurrents. Ian looked at me gravely for a long time before slowly speaking. You are also reborn. Hearing this, I coldly twitched the corner of my mouth, being mercilessly sarcastic, not being able to play everyone like last time and make them your pawns as easily as before. Are you very disappointed? Ian's face immediately became even uglier. Arya. I sharply interrupted him. Don't call my name. It makes me sick. Ian opened his mouth, then was silent for a long time before speaking with difficulty. I'm sorry for what happened in the previous life. This time I can make up for it. I regret it. Once I was arrogant and conceited, because of unimportant things. My mind was clouded and I blindly hurt you. Only after losing you completely did I find that my life could no longer be without you. Will you give me one more chance? Ian's eyes were red, and his voice was a little choked, as if he was in great pain. I folded my arms and looked at him coldly, trying to see the cruel and ruthless true self beneath his elaborately crafted mask. Just because it's a restart. Has the once beloved person who made him extremely miserable become an unimportant person? Then what were the injuries I endured? A ridiculously funny joke? Mr. Ian. Don't you overestimate your acting skills too much? Ian was speechless. I'm fulfilling your long-cherished wish. This time I won't be your sister. And there will be only one outcome between us. I paused, no longer suppressing the resentment in my heart. Looked at him coldly, and spat out 4 words crisply, to the death. That day, I left the Zhu family almost in a hurry. After he left, I had an open and honest talk with Dad once, completely dispelling his idea of adopting Ian. Also starting from this day, I directly gave up the original step-by-step plan and resolutely applied to the school for a long-term suspension of schooling, and followed Dad to learn to handle the company's affairs. This time, I completely calmed down, put away my past easygoing and pleasure-seeking nature, and wholeheartedly just wanted to get involved in the group's affairs as soon as possible. Ian's enduring humiliation and bearing a heavy burden has taught me a truth: only the things held in my own hands will not betray me. Whether it is power or influence, I want them all. No one can shake my decision. After I gradually showed my talent for business, my father, who originally still wanted me to continue being his little princess, completely fell silent. On the way home from an entertainment event, my father held my hand, his eyes full of tears, and on. You are only 16 years old. Dad will bear the burden of the Zhu family. He sighed long, and there was a tinge of defeat in his tone. You still have your dad. Why are you so eager? Do you know that sometimes when Dad looks at you, he feels as if there is a fierce tiger chasing behind? What on earth are you burdened with? Can't you tell Dad? Meeting his eyes full of worry and heartache, I just felt an indescribable soreness in my heart and choked up as soon as I opened my mouth. Dad, I'm sorry. I have to do this. Dad sighed again, his tone full of sorrow. It seems that you have grown up in the blink of an eye and have become someone that I can't even recognize clearly. Hearing this, my eyes became sour and I finally took off the mask that supported my imposing manner in front of others. As before, I threw myself into his arms coquillifly, smelling the reassuring smell on my father. I murmured sullenly, Dad, I'm sorry. I can't stop. No matter what price I need to pay. This time I will change your fate. As long as I take over the burden of the Zhu family, Dad will have time to recuperate his body, and will not be overworked and get sick as in the previous life. Moreover, I heard that Ian has also suspended his studies. Although Ian's family has gone bankrupt, a broken ship still has 3 ties of nails. Now that he has the memories of his previous life, even without the Zhu family as a stepping stone, it is not difficult for him to make a comeback. The enemy is insidious and cunning, and it is not easy to plot against him. I must seize the opportunity and suppress him so that he can't stand up before he has grown up. Preferably, completely weld him in that quagmire so that he can never climb out in his life. 6. After completely breaking with Ian, I directly arranged for people to keep an eye on all his actions. If he wanted to negotiate a cooperation, I would cut in ahead of time. If he wanted to poach my subordinates, I would also offer a salary higher than the market to disrupt his plans. However, after a while, I realized that the chips in my hand were still too few. In order to have more means to deal with him, I devoted more and more attention to the company and was ambitious to grasp the real power as soon as possible. This ambition also made Mia, who had been hiding her true face in front of Dad before, a little restless. When the pregnancy test sheet was placed on the dining table, I clearly felt the air freeze. Old Zhu. I'm pregnant. Mia carefully stroked her belly, with a bit of shyness on her face, and deliberately emphasized. The doctor said it is very likely to be a boy. The dining room was silent. The invisible pressure made Mia's originally hidden expressions of provocation and complacency finally show a bit of uneasiness. Old Zhu. Hasn't Arya always said that the house is too quiet? Having one more younger brother will make it lively, right? She carefully probed. Hearing this, Dad glanced at her flat belly and didn't speak. Mia's face immediately became a little uglier. She was able to successfully marry into the Zhu family after my mother passed away. which was enough to prove that her IQ and DQ were not low. Just a few seconds of silence had made her certain that her husband did not seem to be completely welcoming this sudden son. So, she set her target on me. She quickly walked up to me, took my hand and put it on her belly, smiling as if without any precaution. In a few months, Arya will have a younger brother. Are you happy? TSK. Is she going to start moral blackmailing me? If I said I was not happy, I believe that after today, rumors of my selfishness and viciousness would spread in the circle. Sure enough, the gentle knife is the deadliest. Unfortunately, I am also an evil spirit crawling back from hell. For those who have once harmed me, how can I have such a thing as morality? I slowly curled the corners of my mouth, glanced at the pregnancy test sheet that did not appear in my previous life, and said unhurriedly, if I'm not happy, are you going to make an appointment for an abortion right now? As soon as these words came out, the false smile on Mia's face instantly froze. She stared round-eyed, looking at me as if in disbelief. She gave a dry laugh, her tone extremely difficult. Arya, what are you talking nonsense? Just now you were joking, right? I smiled and pressed the palm on her belly slightly downward, with only coldness left in my eyes. Auntie, do I look like I'm joking? Mia screamed in horror. The hand that had been holding mine instantly threw it away, as if it had grabbed a hot potato. And at the same time, she rushed to Dad in a panic and cried, Old Zoo. My stomach hurt so much. Our child. Before she could finish her words, she fainted with a pale face. Dad, who had been silent all this time, finally reacted. He sighed, ordered the servants to come and help Mia into the bedroom, and at the same time asked the butler to invite a private doctor over. After a flurry of activity, Dad and I went to the company together. Regarding Mia's sudden pregnancy, we both remained silent. I didn't mention it because I had already shown my attitude, but it was rather thought-provoking that Dad also didn't say a word. It has been several months since I told him that Mia was having an affair, and Dad seems to have taken no action. So, is he planning to let this matter pass? I thought calmly, and uncontrollably. A mixed emotion of anger and disappointment welled up in my heart. Looking at my father's still stately figure from the back, I clenched my fingertips tightly and murmured silently, Dad, I promised you before that I would no longer interfere in Mia's affairs. But now I can't keep that promise. Since you choose to be silent, then I will be the bad guy. Whether the child she is carrying is yours or not, I will never let her off. So I'm sorry to disappoint you. 7 After making the decision, I immediately contacted an extremely well-known paparazzi studio in the industry and hired them at a high price to tail Mia and the driver 24 hours a day. Meanwhile, when attending the group meetings, I no longer remained quietly in the background like before. Because having been reborn, I had a vague impression of which fields would thrive and make more money in a few years. By publicly supporting some investment plans that seemed insignificant at present several times, I also attracted the attention of quite a few directors. Regarding this, my father clearly showed his displeasure. Darling, I've said it before. For now, I can still hold on. Business is like a battlefield. You don't need to rush into this muddy water so early. Dad, I must wade into this muddy water. So I'm doomed not to be a carefree greenhouse flower as you wish. My father frowned tightly and suddenly brought up the matter that he had been silent about before. Arya, are you so anxious because your Aunt Mia is pregnant? I smiled and asked unceremoniously in return, then are you choosing to overlook her affair because she is pregnant? As soon as these words were spoken, his previously relatively calm face suddenly turned stern. How dare you? Didn't I tell you not to interfere in that matter? Arya, have I spoiled you so much that you are becoming more and more presumptuous? Looking at his furious appearance, the last shred of hope in my heart seemed to be broken. I gave a bitter smile and, suppressing my sorrow, said, Dad, in your heart, is Aunt Mia and the unborn child more important than me? So, you can tolerate her affair. So, my ambition shown towards the Zhu family now seems extremely irritating in your eyes. Then in the previous life, as her husband, did you also see her true face clearly and then choose to be silent and conniving? At this moment, I was a little afraid to guess the answer. It would be a result that would completely break me down. I tried hard to keep my eyes wide open so that the tears wouldn't spill out of my eyes. After a long, stubborn confrontation with him, I finally fled in a hurry. The second I ran out of the zoo's building, tears slid down my cheeks. I stood among the endless stream of people and broke down in tears. The pain in my heart was no less than when I was tortured by Ian in my previous life. Why? Why, after being reborn, have I tried hard to change my fate? But everything in reality still moved towards a fragmented track? Could it be that this is the truth that God wants to tell me, that fate cannot be reversed? Is the price of reversing fate that I have to endure the loss of all my family ties again and become a lonely person? Then wouldn't this so-called rebirth become a joke? All kinds of absurd and strange thoughts flashed through my mind, and I walked aimlessly on the street in panic for a long time. It was not until the mobile phone in my pocket kept vibrating that I gradually gathered my thoughts. Miss Sue, the hot search has been arranged. The top 3 hot search positions are all ours. 10 minutes later, you can click into Weibo and enjoy the hot search about the wife of the chairman of the zoo group having an affair. The rough and unfamiliar voice came through the receiver, a little distorted. I blinked blankly and thought hard for a second before finally remembering. At 6 o'clock this evening, I had arranged an even more eye-catching big gift for Mia than in my previous life. Now, there were only 7 minutes left until 6 o'clock. At that time, once everything was exposed and Mia was discredited, what would my father's attitude be? Would he scold and punish me more severely for my disobedience than during the day? But I just wanted to seek justice for my former self. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the pictures of Mia having an affair with the Zhu family's driver were on the top of the hot search on time. Immediately following that were controversial news about her past, such as being a hostess in a nightclub, clinging to older men, being a mistress, and having abortions. Because there were professional water armies guiding public opinion, the public relations department of the zoo group was caught off guard. By the time they wanted to contain it, the discussion heat of the hot search had exploded. This was no longer something that could be suppressed simply with money. When I got home, as expected, there was chaos. The ambulance had just left the house. Mia was so angry after seeing the hot search that she fell down the stairs. Most likely, the child in her womb could not be saved. But to my surprise, my father didn't go with her. When he saw me come back, his face instantly became cold and gloomy. "You little rascal. You still know to come back." His voice was loud, but there wasn't too much anger in his tone. I was stunned for a moment and wondered if I was dreaming. However, the next second, my father shouted angrily, "What are you still dawdling for? Come here right away." I hesitated for a moment, walked up to him, and obediently admitted, "I'm sorry, Dad. I was the one behind those hot search topics. I didn't plan to listen to you from the very beginning. Speaking of which," I hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but add another sentence. "In the future, I will do a lot of things that may make you angry. For example, suppressing Ian and making the Ian family, which has just started to show some improvement, disappear completely." Hearing this, my father's face became even gloomier. "Since you know I will be angry, why do you still want to do it?" "Yes, no one can stop me. Because even I myself cannot erase those painful experiences on behalf of my former self." I don't know if my father understood my hidden meaning. He looked at me deeply for a long time, and then sighed helplessly. You are still too young and impulsive." I was stunned when I heard this. "What do you mean?" "The reason why I don't let you get involved is that some things are too dirty and not suitable for a young girl like you to get involved in." Speaking of this, he paused for a moment, with a disappointed and helpless look on his face. "Arya, in your heart, Is Dad really so cowardly and incompetent that he has to pretend to be deaf and dumb when being bullied? Looking at Dad's expression, I felt a little flustered and uneasy in my heart. Did I disrupt your plan? It's okay. Dad has already found out the person who was causing trouble. It's just a matter of time to deal with them. In the blink of an eye, Dad became gentle again. He rubbed the top of my head and told me again, "But don't be so impulsive next time." I nodded vigorously and threw myself into his arms, feeling both aggrieved and excited. On the second day after Mia was hospitalized, Dad took action. The zoo group began to compete frequently for the Lin family's business. It turned out that the person hiding behind Mia and causing trouble was the Lin family. The driver who had an affair with her was just a cover on the surface to deceive people. Even she was just a pawn used by the Lin family to plot for our Su family's property. In this way, it makes sense why in the previous life she was so determined to send me to the old man of the Lin family's bed, marrying me, the only heir, and wanting to take away the control of the zoo group would be a matter of course. It was just that their plan was unexpectedly disrupted by Ian's interference. Thinking of this, my face became a little solemn. Why didn't Ian in the previous life find out the deeper connection between me and the Lin family? Wait, did he really not find out? Or did he find out but deliberately concealed it? The question that made me uneasy soon had an answer. In this life, the reason why Ian was able to turn the tide and reintegrate the bankrupt Tian family after being reborn was actually because of the Lin family. Now that the Lin family has been repeatedly hit hard, and its industries have shrunk significantly, Ian, who depends on the Lin family to survive, has also been seriously affected. After seeing with my own eyes that he was suppressed in the company and evidence of him and leaving the club several times with that old pervert of the Lin family, I finally fully understood how stupid I was in the previous life. Originally, I thought that although this person was a cruel and ungrateful person, at least he still had a moral bottom line. Now it seems that I really overestimated him. The Lin family plotted secretly like this. Dad won't let them go. And neither will I let Ian go. Because of the friendship between the previous generation, I'm actually not sure whether Dad will be soft-hearted towards the only orphan of his friend. So I chose to cooperate with an outsider. After thinking it over and over again, I approached Ryan, the president of the Ryan family, who will fight Tian to the death in the future. Now both Tian and I have just become adults not long ago. These straightforward situations are at most just small skirmishes. But Ryan is different. He is a few years older than us and has already taken control of the Ryan family's right to speak. With his intervention, Ian will have no chance to turn things around. But it is not an easy thing to persuade such a shrewd and calculating person. President Ryan, the Biotechnology Research Institute in Ian's hands is of quite high value. And as far as I know, what they are researching now is exactly in line with the transformation direction that the Ryan family has been seeking all along. Are you really not considering it? Ryan narrowed his eyes and examined me with a half-smile. Suddenly, he said coldly, "You're just a little girl. But you seem to know everything about business affairs." Under his almost sharp gaze, my heart skipped a beat for a moment. And then I calmly exhaled and said vaguely, "It's just from what I've seen and heard." Is that so? Ryan's eyes became more inquiring. As if casually, both you and Dian suddenly showed business acumen. Could this be a coincidence? Hearing this, my mind went blank for a moment. I don't understand what you're talking about. I forced myself to endure the fear and dryly denied it. My hands hidden under the table still clenched into fists uncontrollably. And my heart was also trembling violently. Of course, all this is not a coincidence. My so-called business acumen is just based on my knowledge of the development in the next few years. Now Ryan's eyes almost made me think that my biggest secret had been exposed to these discerning eyes. Just when I was getting goosebumps from his stare, he suddenly looked away and said casually, "Forget it. Whether it's a coincidence or something else, what does it have to do with me?" As he said this, he had already stood up. Before leaving, he finally showed his attitude, Little girl. Although your age seems very unreliable, I'm still quite interested in your research results. I hope you won't let me down. Is he agreeing to cooperate? I stared at his leaving back and slowly widened my eyes. A huge joy fell from the sky and almost made me dizzy. It was not until my mobile phone vibrated that I belatedly pulled myself out of the mind dazed by joy. Miss Sue, the woman you asked me to keep an eye on was secretly picked up half an hour ago. The rough voice of the paparazzo and the news he brought immediately made me sober. Do you know where she was taken? An old warehouse. There was a lot of noise on the paparazzo's side. After a while, he said another sentence. It seems that your father has also come over. 10 by the time I rushed over in a hurry. The old warehouse had been surrounded by police cars and fire engines. There were 2 stretchers covered with white cloths on the ground near the cordon. Not far away, a large amount of thick smoke was rising, as if there was a big fire. Seeing the human-like shapes under those 2 stretchers, my heart trembled violently, and I was about to break through the cordon and run over immediately. At the critical moment, I was held back by a hand reaching out from behind. Baby girl, how did you get here? My father's concerned and nervous voice rang out from behind. I was stiff all over and turned around in disbelief to hug my father. The joy of getting something back after losing it almost made me dizzy. Dad. It's good that you're okay. I was almost scared to death just now. It's okay. It's okay. The Lin family was driven to the wall and wanted to take me down with them. I called the police on my way here, and their plot didn't succeed. While stroking my hair, my father explained what had happened here. When I heard that the 2 dead people were Mia and the driver, what arose in my heart was no longer satisfaction, but sadness. After all, Mia's various actions were all under someone's control. The real culprit was that person from the Lin family. That scumbag who doesn't regard people as people and treats human lives like grass. As if sensing my anger, my father patted my back while comforting me. Baby girl, don't be afraid. Dad is here. Now the police have their eyes on the Lin family. As long as they thoroughly investigate all the bad things they have done, it will be enough for them to be executed 10 times. Hearing this, a glimmer of hope rose in my heart. The news that the old pervert in the Lin family was arrested was exposed half a month later. The Lin group was completely in chaos. Without a leader, the Lin family was like a sheet of loose sand. Shareholders withdrew their investments one after another, and partners also terminated their cooperation. In just a few days, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. On the afternoon when the Lin family announced bankruptcy, I received a call from Ian. Arya, you're really ruthless. In the receiver, his voice was extremely dejected and hoarse. I just sneered and retorted. Just so. Not as much as you. Ian was silent for a long time before he continued hoarsely. This time, I really regret it. Unfortunately, there is no regret medicine in the world. Moreover, I don't believe it. An laughed miserably a few times and then got back to the main topic. Now the most valuable thing in my hand is that research institute. I can give it to you. And then I will leave Beijing, and will never show up in front of you again. I raised my eyebrows slightly in surprise and unceremoniously poked at his wound. Ian, what does it feel like to give up your only hope of making a comeback? There was another silence on the other end of the phone. When I thought the call had been disconnected, his answer finally came. Pain. Despair. The urge to fall. Really? That's wonderful. After all, I had tasted such pain for 6 years in my previous life. I smiled slowly and told him with a malicious voice, knowing that you are in such agony, I finally feel that my nightmare is over. Aryan, you want to give me that research institute as compensation? Unfortunately, I don't want it. You let down my father and the Su family in your last life. In this life, even if you die and become a ghost, I will make your soul full of guilt. After venting out the last trace of resentment, I hung up the phone directly. This call became the last contact between us. Because from this day on, I uncompletely disappeared from Beijing. the research institute in his hand, according to the cooperation agreement, finally fell into the hands of his old rival Ryan. You tried so hard to persuade me to cooperate with you before. You must be very aware of its value. Are you really willing to give it to me? Our Sioux family mainly does real-world business and knows nothing about pharmaceutical technology research and development. So only in your hands can it exert the greatest power. Ryan smiled. After a long time, he sighed with an ambiguous meaning. I really hope that in the future, we won't become opponents in the business world. I'm sorry then. In the future, I will surely become an opponent that you fear. 6 years passed in a blink. In these years, the decision-making power of the zoo group has been smoothly transferred to me, with me sharing the pressure. My father didn't overwork as he did in the previous life and didn't fall seriously ill and remain unhealed. Now, with me shouldering the responsibilities of the zoo family, my father can finally put down all his burdens and travel around to recuperate. When I worked overtime late into the night again, a call from the airline pulled me back from the verge of overwork death. Ian's plane crashed. He died. In the previous life, this crashed flight took away Song Kiao's life. In this life, due to the butterfly effect, they had no intersection at all. Song Kiao was spared the emotional harm brought by him, so there was no such thing as a breakdown and going abroad. However, An himself took the initiative to board that fated plane that was bound to crash. The plane plunged into the high seas, and his body was never found. He chose his own ending personally and left no last words, except for this call to the emergency contact written by his own hand. Seeing the 2 words sister written in the familiar handwriting in the form, there was only coldness left in my heart. The grudges between me and him, those painful memories that haunted my nightmares, should also be buried deep in the seabed along with his remains. After coming out of the airport, I couldn't help but stop and look back. In the crowded flow of people, as if in a trance, there was a transparent figure rapidly moving away from me. With his back to me, he raised his arms high, swinging them vigorously from side to side as he walked, making his final goodbye to me. I stared blankly for a long time, feeling relieved in my heart. May we never meet again. Brother. 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 Brother.